Every once in a while, we need a reminder that it's the details, specifically design and execution, that make or break anything in life. Now, it will come as no surprise that we've come to expect these sort of things, usually in carrying cases that look like this, with names that sound like that. But the question is this: can those same design details and execution be applied to a lesser budget? Yes, we'll get to the discussion of details, but first, the obvious question. What the hell is that thing? Because if you look at it and squint real hard, it looks like a new Defender had sex with an old Ford Flex. In reality, it's neither. It's a Hyundai. Yes, that Hyundai specifically. It is the Hyundai Santa Fe. Now, you may remember I had a discussion with the chief designer of Hyundai Group, Sang-Yip Lee, and he was brutally honest that Hyundai has gone away from what they call the fast follower strategy, which the best way to put it is just copying others' designs and then providing more crap underneath it and charge a lower price. They've kind of gone in their own direction. Yeah, they've taken the boxy idea from G-Wagons and Defenders. Now, personally, I would say it's an incredibly successful design from the front three quarters. There is an angle we do have to discuss. We'll get to that later. Then, what's underneath it? Well, it's pretty much old school Santa Fe, which means it could be on offer in front drive, all-wheel drive, gas, hybrid, or plug-in hybrid. Now, granted, the hybrid and the plug-in hybrid, they're coming at a later date. We'll have to put a pin in that discussion. Now, previously, these were on offer as turbo or non-turbo. However, today, if one wants internal combustion engine underneath this wrapper, anything you want as long as it's the 2.5 Turbo 4 that is mated to the 8-speed dual-clutch transmission. Now, there is some logic behind this, and no, it's not because they want to make soccer moms much faster. Rather, it's because of the size of the vehicle. It doesn't look it, but it's actually bigger. Not sizably bigger that it's like going to displace a Palisade. Rather, it's 2 inches longer in most important dimensions, which makes it heavier, which means you need the more power. Now, how does that impact fuel economy? It's not the best, at least when it comes to internal combustion engine, but remember, this thing has a lot of torque. So it's 20, 29, 24 combined. Now, we have to understand how that all works before we jump behind the wheel. A favor, you know what I'm going to ask here. If you see value in these episodes, do all the YouTube things, subscribe, notifications, and like, but most importantly, share these episodes with your friends on all your socials. The algorithm won't change until you interact with it. Welcome to just outside beautiful Nashville, Tennessee, more specifically just outside Franklin, Tennessee. Now that we have pleasantries out of the way, 4,575 pounds, or depending on expressive weights and measures, 2,075 kilograms. Now, a rather important point of order. If this were the most basic front-wheel drive flavor of Santa Fe, it would be 230 pounds lighter with that normal mode. Ooh, slight delay there. About 2,500 RPM. Wow, does it kick in. And that's where you and I have driven this engine in many Genesis, many Kia, many Hyundai, and it is magnificent. I wouldn't call this thing a powerful vehicle, but it is a torquey vehicle. But more importantly, why is that important? Because the torque is what's usable in driving a now larger Santa Fe around town, so it's better to dart in and out of traffic. Now, yeah, a lot of people have complained about the dual clutch transmission. I am not one of them. It's not one of these situations where I want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. How about we do something like this? The shifts are smooth enough. You're not going to really get smoother, but there's that delay there. So maybe before switching to a torque converter solution, which others in the Hyundai Kia group have done, how about we go with a tune of this transmission where we get rid of that delay and we get torque sooner, because really that's what you're going to use around town, which is really what this tool is designed for. Now that we have that out of the way, let's press on. So let's dive into the details. The first stop would be what I feel is the weak point of the vehicle, the R-Sand. And I'm not just saying this because I'm Greek. I'm saying this to you because we've already discussed the front and the super strong proportions there, to the point where people see it and they don't know what it is and they say, what the hell is that thing? The back, it's just kind of weak. It falls down, it bows out and then back in, which makes it feel narrow from the back as opposed to strong and wide in the front. But it turns out I had a discussion with the engineer of the vehicle. There's a reason for it. So I'd say there's a logic to this madness. What they were trying to do was make the opening wider. So the width of the usable loading space goes from here to about here. Put another way, it's equivalent to that of like a Chevy Tahoe, a full-size SUV. So you got to think about the calculus here. Are you willing to trade usability for an ass end that might not be as attractive? Now, of course, that's a question where the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Then, speaking of beauty, you will notice this pattern here. Now, truth be told, this pattern or detail is more successful in the front of the vehicle. You're looking at it and think, oh yeah, I see it in the light signature here. Turns out this is less corporate branding and more Where's Waldo. You can see it in the grille. You can see it in the lower grille. It even extends to the inside of the vehicle where all the vents have the same pattern, but they're finished in like a satin type silver. Nice touch, but this is where you have to ask yourself, beauty in the eye of the beholder. Is this just right, or is this a bridge too far? Speaking of bridges, apparently they threw one of those in as well. A dead giveaway would be the roof rack. Yes, it's significantly more chunky and purposeful than what one would find on similar commodity crossovers, no matter the brand. But here there's two things going on. Number one, yes, it probably is more functional because there's more heft there. And number two, this is one of these design aspects that make it look more Defender G-Wagen. So it's not the whole theme they've stolen, just pieces of it. Now this, of course, brings us to the obvious question. How the hell do you access it, especially if you don't want to carry around a stepladder? Simple. This is where the bridge comes in. Handle here, foot here, pull yourself up here. I wouldn't classify this so much as a detail as rather torture. Second time this week doing this for you guys. That shows you how much I love you. But while we're here, that is where a 6-footer would sit. Now, point of order, the captain's chairs, which the calligraphy has, this is the only way to get it. So you have to get the fanciest one to get the captain's chairs. All the other flavors have a rear bench, so basically more seats. Now, while we're here, we should talk about a detail, a rear AC controller. So I can independently control the fan in the third row, and there's this like vent here. Throughout this episode, you and I have been focusing in on details, but really we need to focus in on what this thing is all about, and that is ride quality. Now, I've been doing this for over 15 years, and when I first started, Hyundais, they weren't bad, they weren't great. Why do I say that? They were at the point where they had been through the absolute Rubicon of terrible reputation of reliability. They fixed that. Then the cars just looked bland. Then they hired all these like German designers and American designers, made the cars look good, but there was a catch. The cars looked good and they started to be a really strong value. Like they were crowing things like heated rear seats in an Elantra. But as you know, nothing is free in this world. How did you get the heated seats in like a $15,000 car? They took it out of the driving dynamics. The rear suspension was crap, or the tuning wasn't great. Here, light years, huge difference. Now granted, they've made differences over the years, like small step changes in Genesis, Hyundais, and Kias. This is a huge step forward in this one area. Now, I actually drove this thing on very bad roads in LA first. Couldn't tell you about it because it was for evaluation of World Car. But the ride quality is what slaps you across the face once you get past the design. It has a premium car feel. Yeah, Mazda's been kind of using that term a lot, trying to say, we're like a BMW. Not so much. This also, not like a BMW, but there is that added weight, that 4,600 pounds works to your advantage here. The tuning of it works. Now, granted, is it a sports car? No, no one wants it to be a sports car. No one's going to complain that it's going to basically fall in on itself if I go around this corner too fast. But now, why do I say that? There's a number of aspects that contribute to all of this. Like, for example, steering. In a car like this, whether it's a Hyundai, a Honda, or a Chevy, no one expects much. Here, It's not trying to be a performance car, it's not trying to be an N, but believe it or not, the steering actually has weight to it in a vehicle that really is a glorified baby buggy. Yes, it is indeed that time again to play your favorite game of mine, the options game, with today's contestant, a very detail-oriented and very fancy Hyundai Santa Fe. This for a base price of $33,950. Now, a couple of details there. Number one, this is not the $34,000 car. This is the most expensive one. This is the Caligraphy. However, that $34,000 car can be had with the same platform, no turbocharger, different carrying case, from a different Korean manufacturer for $2,000 less. That's my way of saying Kia and Hyundai, they had a choice there. Do you have the regular and the turbo, or just the turbo? Hyundai decided to go with more power because of their vehicle. They want it to be more premium, so hence the turbocharger cost you an extra $2,000 if you're really doing the math there. Then what about other models? There's an SEL, there's an XRT, which is if the Hyundai Santa Fe had sex with a Subaru Outback. It's kind of taller, has more ground clearance, more body cladding, supposed to go off-road. That one with all-wheel drive is about $40,000. Then there's this one, the Caligraphy. This has the head-up display, it has the Napa leather, it has all the bits that make it fancy. As such, it has a fancy price. $46,500. That is the front-wheel drive. If one wants all-wheel drive, that's an additional $1,800 pretty much on any one of them. But then you look at that color and you're like, wow, I've never seen that on a Hyundai before. It's bronze and it's a matte finish. It costs an additional $1,000. A couple of notes there. Number one, yes, it is a matte finish. And number two, depending on the choice of color, no matter the trim level of Santa Fe, it does change the trim color. In this case, it is black. Then the only other thing we add is the destination and handling from the exotic port of call of Alabama for $1,395. I'd also like to point out here, like I did in the Kia episode, that is $400 more than the destination on a $130,000 Mercedes-Benz S-Class that comes von Sindelfingen. So think about that. Which brings us to a total retail price of, built-in, $50,695. Apparently, details, they don't come cheaply. Okay, now that you and I are all on the same page of that it does not come cheaply, let's get back to the details. A little bit behind the scenes, in the 1 week that I've been driving this, I also drove the updated Kia Sorento X-Pro in Colorado. And really, it's the same vehicle underneath, it's the wrapper that changes. But one very important difference is the UX. Now, in the Kia, and you've seen me complain about this, they have that, it's really not a haptic feedback, it's like a touch-sensitive screen with one knob where it switches between menu controllers. It's not as bad as like what the Germans are doing, but it ain't great. It took away from the simplicity that Kias and Hyundais had. Hyundai has smartly stayed with that. So they've got a knob here. And guess what? Even as I go around a turn here, there's a knob there. And there's real buttons for all the applications up here. And then very frequent use items, like drive mode. Auto hold, I wouldn't call that frequent use. This is one of these things like, really, why do you do this in Hyundais and Kias and Genesis, where I gotta press this to engage the auto hold? Let's just make it on all the time. If people don't want it, they can go deep into a menu when the car is parked and switch it off rather than doing it every time. So, vielen Dank on that. Then, let's press on to some more details. This one is the fancy one. It's the better part of 50 grand, so it should feel it. Now, the headliner you were looking at there, you're like, is that suede? The answer would be no, that is not suede. That is a faux suede, but it really goes a long way to tying in all the color and trim details. Now, huge point, I want to put a pin in this, because on this drive, all I saw was the fancy one and like the mid-grade XRT. I want to see what the cheap one looks like on the inside before I pass judgment on the whole revision of the interior. Then, we have to talk about my phone, which I can't find for some reason. Why can't I find it? Because it's hidden up here. Press this button here, and it sterilizes my phone. Now, they tell me it's ultraviolet rays -C. So it's kind of like USB in space. Now this is lovely and all, but we got to put aside whether one thinks that's a gimmick or not, because that's going to take about 10 minutes to do, at least the engineers tell me that, and focus on the bigger picture, what that contributes to. You look at the inside of this thing, like, there's a lot more space in there. And put aside the dimensions, but there seems like a lot more space that people can use. And that's because you've got this big tray over here that has not one but two wireless chargers, and then plugs and then buttons and all this stuff here. But really, we need to ask ourselves, how did they reclaim all of this real estate? Because it wasn't just by hiding your phone in a gamma ray closet. Well, look around. What's missing? They moved the gear shift to the steering column, kind of like a 1974 Buick. Very similar to what we've seen in the Ioniq 5. And the whole idea is, by having all this connectivity, but not all this crap in your face, you're focusing on the UX, but then you spend some time fooling with the UX, and the idea is to focus back on the road. This is where Hyundai's kind of ahead of the curve in this area. Like, for example, let's go into the home here, and you will see that I'm wirelessly connected. Whether you go the Apple route, the Google route, dark road, whatever it is, there's no longer the need to pull out a wire. And what's important about that, that's even in the cheap seats, in the most basic one. Okay, so details like a faux suede headliner or a fancy ride quality, or even a design that stands out, that's really not what this thing is about. It's about two things. Number one, a more thoughtful approach on the execution of a vehicle that's supposed to be usable in many different ways. That's what Hyundai has accomplished here. And number two, this is very much trying to be like this, meaning more fancy, which brings us to the wish list. And here, call me crazy, but a Santa Fe for 51 grand, that is all the money in the world. Granted, 36 grand for an all-wheel drive, okay. But for this one, the fancy one, before we even get to the hybrid and plug-in hybrid, I'm thinking you do need adjustable dampers here to give choices for ride quality in different situations like this. Where we drove today, this is where fancy people live, and I think fancy people, they want a ride quality closer to this, even if they're trying to save a couple of bucks. But I am just one man, and this is the point of the episode. I turn around to you guys to opine in the comments below, or via our social media, MotoManTV, all one word, MotoManTV, all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Now, if you found this episode of value, I'd highly suggest you watch one of our other formats, specifically the Living With format, where we go beyond the first drive review, and we spend time living with these vehicles. Recently, we lived with a Range Rover to answer the question, is their dreadful reputation of reliability still well deserved? You can see that episode here. Until I see you in the next episode, bis später.